Hi, Elaine here. Today I'll be sharing the easiest way to automate alternating column colours in Affinity Publisher. This video follows on from the last video I created all about formatting table rows. The videos are complementary. Do check that one out before or even after if columns are your primary concern. The link is in the description. But this time we are primarily concerned with formatting columns. This is the first table we're going to format. It's a habit tracker. It has 32 columns and 31 rows. Column A is where we're going to list the actual habits. Columns B to F are where you would put ticks when you've completed that habit. Now, when I say column F, I don't mean this table only has 6 columns. Affinity Publisher doesn't use the same notation as Excel does. Once the number of columns gets to 26, or Z, it just starts over. Now that's not a crisis, since Affinity Publisher doesn't calculate, whereas Excel does. That's why Excel needs a unique reference for each cell, and Affinity Publisher doesn't. There is a heading row, and then the remaining columns have alternating colours from B to the second instance of column F. But we're going to be starting completely from scratch. That is what we need it to look like when we finished, but this is what we're starting with. If you saw the last video, you'll know that we could start this by formatting this table and then creating a table format from it. But you can also do it completely manually by starting with a blank table format. And that's the way I'm going to create the table format for this table. Over to Table Formats, in the burger menu, you can see Add Format from Selection is dimmed out because I don't have a selection. I'm going to create a new format. It has actually created that format, it just hasn't opened it in edit mode. Clicking the burger menu, select Edit Format 1. The very first thing to do in here is to give it a meaningful name. Habit Tracker makes sense as that's what it is. The next thing to consider is the structure of the table. When you create a blank table format, it gives you 9 cells and 1 cell format. What you need to do is to consider what is the most optimal structure for your table. Now, I don't need 9 cells here. I've worked out that all I need are 2 rows. There's a header row, and then the rest of the rows are all body rows. So within my structure here, we have the ability to add, that's what the plus buttons are for, add a column, add a row, but you can also take away a row or take away a column. And I'm going to take away a row because we definitely only need 2 rows. We do need 3 columns, one for the actual habit itself, the title of it, and because we need alternating columns, one will be without a fill and the other one will have the light blue fill. I'm going to start by making the format for the header. To do that, select a cell. When you select a cell in the cell formats, it selects the currently applied cell format. At the moment, that is set to default. I prefer not to have any unused cell formats in there, so I'll use default as the starting point to create the cell format for my header. Now, I'm starting off by creating header left rather than just header, because the first column, our header column, the title is going to be left aligned. The rest will be centre aligned. We will need another cell format. But what I'm going to do now is work my way through here and apply what I need. The fill is going to be the dark accent colour. Now, initially, this doesn't look right. It's applied that to all 6 cells, but that's because all 6 cells are formatted with the single cell format we have. This will sort itself out down the line. I'm going to take away all of the borders that we have at the moment because they're black and I don't need them, but I will be putting in an interior horizontal and I want that to be the blue accent colour, the dark one, and the width of that is going to be a very light 0.2. Then there are the insets. It's quite small, so I'm only putting an inset of 1mm all the way around. I want a vertical position of middle. And in the text style, I have a range of text styles available for this. The 3 we'll be working with are table body headings centred and table body headings left. This one needs to be the left one. And that is the first cell format created. I'm moving on to the next cell now. This one needs a slightly different cell format. So hitting the plus button in the cell formats, I now have format 2. This one is going to be a header as well, but this one is going to be the centered version of that. Now luckily, because it already had formatting applied, I don't have to go through and do all of the formatting. What I need to do is make one single change in here, which is I don't want the headings to be aligned to the left, I want them to be aligned to the center. Then moving to the next cell, by default that is set to header left. I need that set to header center. So I select it. Remember, when you're working with these cell formats, select in the structure pane rather than the cell formats, because clicking in the cell formats applies that format to whichever cell is selected in the structure pane. That is our header row done. Moving down to the cell that will contain the actual habits now. And I need another cell format. Clicking plus, I get my third one. This one I'm going to call habit. And I will need to make some changes to this. It doesn't need a fill at all. So I'll take the fill away. I am keeping the border as is. I'm keeping the insets as they are. But I don't want it to have a heading text style. I just want it to have the table body style for the text. Then I'm moving on to our 5th cell and making another cell format. This one is going to be a standard column. Again, it doesn't need a fill. The only other thing I need to change is the text style. Change that back to table body. We now only need one more, which is the last one, which is our alternate colour. Making another cell format. It is going to be a column, but it's going to have the alternate format on it. So column alt. The fill needs to be blue, but not the deep blue. It needs to be the light accent colour. Everything else can stay the same, apart from the text style, which needs to be table body. And that is it. Or is it? Well, let's apply it and see how we're doing so far. Remember, it doesn't apply until you have selected the table and you apply it. And just to be absolutely certain, I'm going to apply it and choose Override Local as well. Well, looking on the bright side, we do have some columns with alternate colours. They're not right, and the rows look terrible. But we're getting there. Let's have a look what changes we need to make this work. Going in and editing it. Our problem is the habit column is actually a heading column. And we've not told our table format that there is a heading column. To do that, we need to use our arrows in here. Clicking that moves the marker to the right-hand edge of that first column, and that tells it that that first column is a header. But looking at this, we also know that we have a header row as well, and we don't want that repeated either. There's another arrow. This one will enable us to tell it that there's one header row. So clicking that, we now have the dotted lines indicating where the headers are, the non-repeating elements. And let's OK that. Absolutely perfect. What's more, once we've created that table format, that is something to keep a hold of. It can be transferred between files, and it makes formatting additional tables happen at lightning speed. I have another blank table here, unformatted. With it selected, move into the table formats. Here's the table format that we created. Again, I'm going to override any local formatting, and it's done. So while it might take a few minutes to create the table format, from that point on, applying it is a complete breeze. And that's the first example. But what of something a little more complicated, like this invoice? A real-world example, if you like. Here there are actually two tables. Let's zoom in and have a look at it. The top table contains the items on the invoice. It has a header row and 5 differently formatted columns. The lower table is a summary. That has a footer row and 2 completely differently formatted columns. The left-hand column that contains subtotal and tax being a header column. Obviously, that's the finished formatting. Let's take a look at an unformatted version of that. We'll start by formatting the invoice items table. With it selected, going to Table Formats, Burger menu, and choosing Create New Format. Then the lower burger menu and Edit Format 1. First thing to do as ever, give it a meaningful name, in this case invoice body. Then the next step is to consider what the structure of that table should be. By default, when you create a new table format, you are offered 3 rows by 3 columns. But we know we need 5 columns, all of them are going to be differently formatted. How many rows do we need though? And while there are 6 items in there and a header row, we only actually need 2. So we need to alter that structure. Using the plus button on the right hand side, I'm going to add 2 columns to it. And using the minus button at the top, I'm going to delete 1 row. Then set about creating the formats I need, starting in the very first cell. This one needs to be a header. In fact, all 5 of the top cells need to be headers. The entire row is going to be a header row. We need to inform Affinity Publisher of that, and we do that by using the down arrow. By clicking that, you're telling it that the top row is a header row, and everything below that needs to be repeated as many times as necessary to format the table. Then I'm going to define what that header row should look like. First of all, giving it a name. Now I am editing the default cell format because I don't like to have cell formats hanging around that aren't actually in use. Renaming that header and then starting to define it. The fill needs to be the dark accent colour. It doesn't need any borders, selecting all of the borders and then turning them off. The inset needs to be 2 mm. The vertical position is middle, and again I have a range of text styles to apply here. The one required for the header is table body header. As I said, that format will apply to the first cell, the second, third, fourth and fifth of the header row. Moving down, I'm now formatting the columns, and I'm starting with column A. While I would normally give them more descriptive names, it makes sense for demonstration purposes to call these column A, B, C, D and E. Having got that cell format created, next thing to do is format it. Now the first column needs to have a background of grey. For the borders, I'm going to have horizontal borders. But I'm not going for the default of 0.5, I'm going for 0.2, so they're quite thin. Insets of 2 mm is fine, the vertical position is middle, but I do need a different format. This column needs to have anything in it be bold and centred. So in here I have table body emphasis centred, and that will format that text in that way. That is column A formatted. Moving on to column B, I need to create another cell format. This one isn't going to have a fill, although you could give it a fill of white if you wanted. The horizontal borders need to be 0.2 like column A. Insets of 2 mm, vertical position middle, but the text in this one is going to be slightly different in that it contains the description. My text style is called table body description, and that is column B formatted. And creating another style, guess what this one's called? Yes, column C. This one needs to have a grey background fill. It needs those horizontal borders adding, again at 0.2. Insets of 2 mm, vertical position set to middle, and the text this time needs to be centred. And we move on to the next column, which is column D. We're alternating here, so this one doesn't have a fill. It does have the horizontal borders though, of 0.2. 3 of the insets need to be set to 2 mm, but the right hand inset needs to be 8 mm. To do that, I need to click on the Link Insets option to unlink them and change the right hand one to 8 mm. Vertical position is still middle, and the text in this one is going to be formatted as table body right. It's going to be right aligned, but remember I've changed the inset to move it back a little bit to put more of a gap between the text and the edge of the cell. Then we move on to the last cell, make a new cell format, this one being column E, the last column. This one is going to have the grey fill. It's going to have the horizontal borders of 0.2. It's going to have 3 insets of 2mm, but the right inset is going to be 8mm again. Vertical position of middle, and a text style of table body right. And we have our format. We know if we click OK, it won't automatically apply unless we put a tick in the Apply Style to Selection box, and the table is actually selected. So putting a tick in there and clicking OK. And we have a perfectly formatted table. Only one table left to go, and that is the summary table at the bottom. Selecting that, up to Table Formats, and create another new format. Lower burger menu on that and edit. This one is the invoice summary, and again our first consideration is what is the structure of the table. You may think we're almost there with the structure this time, because there are 3 rows in that table. But we can afford to lose one of the columns because we only have 2 columns. First thing to do then is to take away that column. That structure now replicates exactly what we have in the table. But is it correct? And the answer is no, it's not. In that table, the subtotal row and the tax row will be formatted the same. The grand total row will have a different format. Actually, it's a footer. And the first column, column A, are actually all headers. So we need to make some changes in here. We only need 2 rows. So moving to the minus button and deleting one of the rows. Then I need to tell it column A is a header column. I do that with the right facing arrow. I also need to tell it that the bottom row is a footer. I do that with the up arrow here, and what that does is tell it that that bottom row only needs to appear once. But the top row needs to appear as many times as required to format this table. Then I need to format all 4 cells, starting with the first one. Again, I'm going to redefine this default one. And this first cell contains, it's a header, and it contains the item. So I'm calling the cell format header item. It doesn't need a fill, and it doesn't need all the borders either. So first job is to take the borders away. The second thing I need to do is to add the interior horizontal borders. And again, I'm going for 0.2 with that, so it matches the other table. The insets here are going to be 2mm. The vertical position is middle. And again, I have some text styles. And the text style for this is going to be table body, right emphasis, which means it will be bold. And then move on to the next cell. Create another cell format. This one is for the actual item. It doesn't need a fill. I'm leaving the horizontal borders at 0.2. The insets do need altering though. 3 of them are going to be 2mm, but again, to match the other table, I'm changing the right inset from 2 to 8. Vertical position middle, and my text format for this is table body right. And moving on to the third cell, creating another cell format. This one is again a header, so adding that to the name to make it clear to me, and it's the total. The fill for this needs to be black. The insets at 2mm are fine, vertical position is the middle, but I am going to need to change the text format. If I left it as it was, we wouldn't be able to see it because the text would be black. So for this, I need table body right, but I need the emphasis to make it bold and Alt to make it white text. And then move on to the last cell. Make another cell format. This one is a total of the items. It needs the fill to be black. Borders of 0.2 are fine. In the insets though, I need to change that right inset to 8. Vertical position middle. And again, I do need to change the text format because I need the text to be white. And we have our final table format. Putting a tick in the Apply Style to Selection because that table is selected, and click OK. And we have not 1, but now 2 perfectly formatted tables. Just like the first example, you may be thinking, oh, this is long-winded, it'll take me forever. But the thing is, once you've done it and you've created a table format, those table formats can be reused. They can also be transferred between files. So they're actually a long-term asset if you've taken the time to create them. And once they do exist, formatting becomes a job that takes seconds rather than hours. Going back to our pages, I have a third copy of this invoice, and this one is unformatted. Bringing my table formats to the front, selecting the detail table, choosing to override the local formatting with the invoice body, and doing exactly the same with the invoice summary, and that's just how fast you can format an entire document. Let's have a quick recap. This video is a complement to the one I shared about formatting table row colours in Affinity Publisher. Highly recommend you give that one a watch. Table formats are the key to creating automated alternate table column colours. The first example was a habit tracker, and that only needed 3 column formats. One for the header column, one for the standard columns, and one for the alternate coloured columns. The second example was an invoice with 2 tables. The invoice items table had 5 differently formatted columns defined in its table format. It also had a header row. The summary table had 4 differently formatted cells in the table format, formatting 6 cells in the final table. Those 4 different cell formats were a header on the left, an item on the right, and the footer row had 2 columns. They were formatted with a black background and white text via a text style. Master column and row formatting in table formats, and you will have no limits when it comes to formatting tables. If you want new tutorials and tips and tricks on a regular basis, check out my free training at elainegiles.com/VIP. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss future tutorials. And if you have any requests for specific tutorials, be sure to contact me. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.